All right, welcome. Today we're diving into what is basically a two-front war that's going to define the entire future of blockchain. It's this epic battle between the desperate need for speed and the absolute fundamental requirement for trust. One's a tech problem, the other's a human one. And winning both? Well, that's everything.
So let me just start with a question for you. What could a goofy game about breeding digital cats possibly have to do with the future of the entire internet? Well, as it turns out, a whole lot, actually.
And here is the problem in a nutshell. You see, back in 2017, this game, CryptoKitties, just blew up. It went viral. And the frenzy to buy and trade these little digital cats got so intense that it literally brought the entire Ethereum network to a grinding halt. Transactions were delayed for days. Fees went through the roof, and it was a massive wake-up call. It proved that for blockchain to ever go mainstream, it had to solve this huge bottleneck problem.
Yeah, so that whole fiasco basically lit a fire under everyone. It kicked off this frantic race to find a solution. The big question became, how do you scale a blockchain for millions or even billions of users without giving up on security and decentralization? And this is where some really key technologies started to emerge. The big answer, the one that's really taken hold, is something called Layer 2 solutions, or L2s for short. And the concept is actually kind of brilliant. Instead of trying to build a bigger, wider main highway, you just build these super fast express lanes right on top of it. L2s are these high-capacity networks that sit on a main blockchain like Ethereum, and they handle the bulk of the work off-chain, where everything is way faster and way cheaper.
Now, the most popular kind of L2 out there are called rollups. And honestly, the best way to think about them is like a zip file for your transactions. They take hundreds, sometimes thousands, of individual transactions, squish them all down into one single compressed piece of data, and then they just post that one tiny file back to the main blockchain. It makes things incredibly more efficient.
And these rollups come in two main flavors. First, you have optimistic rollups. They basically work on an innocent until proven guilty model. They just assume all the transactions are valid unless someone challenges them within a specific time window. This makes them really fast and cheap. On the other side, you've got ZK rollups. Now, these are more like a super strict auditor. They use some really advanced math, cryptography, to mathematically prove every single transaction is valid before it gets finalized. It's more secure right away, but it does take a little more computing power.
But you know, rollups aren't the only game in town. There are also sidechains, which are kind of like parallel blockchains that have their own security rules but still connect back to the main one. And then there's sharding, which is this idea of splitting the main blockchain itself into a bunch of smaller shards that can all work at the same time. They're all different weapons in the war against that CryptoKitties-style congestion.
Okay, so we're building these lightning-fast systems, right? They can handle just immense amounts of value. But that creates a whole new problem, doesn't it? How in the world do you secure all that value? Because a faster system with weak security is really just a faster way to lose all your money. And this whole issue led to a critical evolution in how we protect our digital stuff.
For ages, the gold standard for security was this thing called multi-signature, or multisig. Just think of it like one of those bank safes that needs multiple physical keys to open. You need several different people to approve a transaction before it goes through. But now there's a newer, much more advanced approach called multi-party computation, or MPC. And with MPC, there isn't more than one key. Instead, a single key gets digitally shattered into a bunch of encrypted pieces, or shards, which then get spread around.
But here's the thing. Multisig had some really big problems. It wasn't universal. You had to write custom, really complex code for every single blockchain. And if that code had even one tiny flaw, the results were catastrophic. We're talking about things like the parody wallet hack that permanently locked away hundreds of millions of dollars. Just gone. Plus, it was a total nightmare to manage. Trying to change who had approval rights was a huge pain.
And this is exactly why MPC is such a game changer. It gets rid of that single point of compromise. The complete private key is never, ever assembled in one place on one device. Ever. Instead, those separate little shards work together to sign off on things without ever having to recombine. It's a massive leap forward for security. It really is.
All right, so we've got these incredible new tools for speed and for security. The tech is getting there. But what happens when a project has all the fancy tech, but it completely loses everyone's trust? And that brings us to a fascinating, and let's be honest, a highly controversial case study, PulseChain.
You know, this quote from the YouTube channel Coinsider really just sets the stage perfectly. PulseChain was supposed to be a more decentralized version of Ethereum, but right from the jump, critics have been pointing to some really glaring issues. So let's just look at the actual data.
Yeah, this number, it's just staggering. On-chain analysis shows that over 90%, 90, of the entire supply of PulseChain's token, PLS, came from a single address, an address that was linked right back to the project's own fundraising. And in a proof-of-stake network, where owning tokens means having power, well, that level of concentration is a massive, massive red flag for centralization.
And if you look at the project's history, it's been a real roller coaster. It started back in 2021 with this sacrifice fundraising thing. Then, after a pretty rocky launch, the SEC sued its founder, Richard Hart, in 2023. They alleged securities fraud, claiming he spent investor funds on things like a 555-carat black diamond. Now, while the most serious fraud charges were eventually dropped, there are other legal troubles still going on, casting this long shadow over the whole project.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, critics see this pattern emerging. You've got a controversial founder with a history of legal trouble. You have a launch strategy that a lot of people felt was just designed to get around regulations. You have the extreme centralization we just talked about. And finally, you have really poor market performance, with the price and trading volume just tanking. It's a textbook case of how a project's foundation can be questioned no matter what its tech looks like.
And this, right here, brings us to the real heart of the issue, the core tension of this entire explainer. The real battle for blockchain's future? It isn't just about writing better code. It's about confidence.
Look, at the end of the day, we are seeing some brilliant technology emerge. Layer 2s are solving the speed problem, and MPC wallets are solving the security problem. The technical war, it's being won. But as the whole PulseChain saga shows us, you can have the most advanced technology on the planet, but if the community doesn't trust the people behind it, if the system isn't genuinely decentralized, then the whole thing is just built on a foundation of sand. And that really leaves us with one big question to chew on. As this technology pushes for mass adoption, what's the real mountain we have to climb? Is it innovating and building even faster, even more secure systems? Or is it solving that much messier, much more human problem of earning and keeping public trust? Thanks for watching.